So this morning we're concluding our Marked message series in which we've been looking at some of the ways that the Father tells us in His Word that He puts His mark, His divine fingerprint on His children's lives. And more importantly, we've been actually creating space in these services for the Lord to mark and to remark our lives. And by the way, just because this is our last Sunday, I don't think this needs to be the last Sunday where we're expecting the Lord to mark our lives. Or do you guys want to just move on? No? Okay. So that's not done, but the journey, the message series itself is done. Quickly, by way of review, here's what we've seen in this marked journey. We first of all have seen that God marks us with His name and actually marks Himself with our names, and that creates for us a sense of belonging to the Father and a sense of value. We've seen that He marks us in close, intimate relationship with Himself. We've seen that He marks us with an identity and the ability to embrace our unique God-given design, and He marks us with a destiny that is a purpose for our unique design. And so today we're turning our focus outwards. The title of the message is Looking for and Leaving a Mark. And by this we're going to see that God marks us as Christ followers to recognize His divine fingerprint on the lives of people out there, outside the walls. We're marked to look for and to call out God's divine fingerprint on the lives of others. So in the movie Toy Story, which I began this series with a couple weeks ago, some reaction to that. Some of you had this nightmare, right? The two main characters, Woody and Buzz, come into contact with some toys from out there, right? Toys that aren't marked with their master's name, so to speak, Andy's name. Toys who have been hideously disfigured by, this rotten neighbor kid or this malevolent neighbor kid, Sid. These toys have been abused, they're broken, and they're voiceless. They don't have the ability to tell their stories. They don't even have the ability to ask for the help that they probably need. And Woody and Buzz's knee-jerk reaction, if you remember, to these toys is fear, right? And in their fear, Woody and Buzz make up, they completely invent the backstory for these broken, voiceless toys. Do you remember what they say? They're cannibals. They eat their own. You remember that now, right? Isn't that what we do? Isn't that what we do in real life to those who are other, those who are out there, those who are different, those who don't have a voice to tell us why things are the way they are in their lives? And we make up a backstory for them. And our invented backstories only serve the purposes of keeping them a safe distance from us, protecting ourselves from the fear of this unknown other. And I'd like to suggest to you that we in the church, I believe, have an unfortunate reputation, if not an unfortunate history, of fear of the other. Fear of those out there who don't yet have our master's name written on them, at least yet. And with the result that we make up these false narratives about who they are and why they are. We make up judgments that serve the purpose of keeping them at a safe arm's distance and protecting ourselves from the fear of the unknown. They're cannibals. They eat their own. Isn't that what we do? Yeah, so I want to take a moment just for personal reflection, to reflect on these questions. Who are the others out there for me? The scary ones that I make up stories, and what are the stories that I make up about them? So I'm going to give you a moment just to think about who those broken, disfigured, misfit toys are around you and the stories you make up. So you think about this. I'm going to give you some prompts as you're reflecting, and you can jot it down on your notes. Do those misfit toys in your life have a different color of skin, a different ethnicity? Do they have a tattoo? Or maybe a tie? Or maybe a turban? Maybe they belong to a different political party. Maybe they drive a beater car. Maybe they drive a Beamer. Maybe they drive a buggy. Maybe they have piercings. Maybe they wear pearls. Maybe they have dirt under their fingernails. Maybe they have a pedicure. Maybe they're a millennial. Maybe they're a boomer. Okay, boomer. So take a moment. Who are the misfit toys around your life? And what are the stories that you make up about them? Point is, we're all naturally predisposed, I would suggest, to see others, to see the other, those who are out there as unsafe. And we can tend to make up backstories to protect ourselves from them and to keep them at a safe distance. But in his word, in hundreds of different places and probably hundreds of different ways, the Father shows us as his children that he's marked us, and he wants us to be not naturally predisposed to see others in a certain way, but to be supernaturally predisposed to see others differently, to see them as he sees them. He marks us not to fear others. Perfect love casts out fear, the word tells us. He marks us not to judge the other. He marks us not to protect ourselves against the other, but to lovingly look for his divine fingerprint on them. And we see this in verses like 2 Corinthians 5:14 through 16. Christ's love controls us. We're controlled by Christ's love. And what's the outcome of that? So since we believe that Christ died for all, including those out there, he died for everyone, so that those who receive his new life will no longer live for themselves. Instead, they will live for Christ, who died and was raised for them. And so we have stopped evaluating others from a human point of view. We've stopped looking at them from this perspective. When we're supernaturally controlled by the love of Christ, we're controlled to stop evaluating others, to stop judging them, to stop making up backstories about them from a human point of view, but rather we're to look at them with the Father's eyes and to look for the Father's mark on them. And we're to see them as precious objects of Jesus' sacrificial, saving love. Now listen to this. Even if that person is not living into his or her divine fingerprint. That in your notes, I've included Genesis 1:26, where God says each and every human being is created in his image. And we're to look at every individual we come into contact with and look for, to recognize, to call out God's divine fingerprint on them, because it is there, even if they're not living into that image. We see this truth in the biblical story of the first murderer of human history. And you may know the story of Adam and Eve and their oldest son, Cain. Here's what we read. So one day, Cain suggested to his little brother Abel, hey, let's go out into the fields. So they did, and while they were out in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Afterward, the Lord asked Cain, hey, where's your brother? Where's Abel? God knows the answers to these questions, right? I don't know, Cain responded. Am I my brother's guardian? But the Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground, and now you are cursed and banished from the ground which has swallowed your brother's blood. No longer will the ground yield good crops for you, and no matter how hard you work, From now on, you will be a homeless wanderer on the earth." And Cain replied to the Lord, "Oh, my punishment is too great for me to bear. You have banished me from the land and from your presence, and you have made me a homeless wanderer. Anyone who finds me will kill me." It's hard for me to get inside Cain's head. Is he just like that arrogant? I don't know. It's just curious to me what's the heart underneath Cain's words. I'm judging. I'm making up stories about why, all right, which is what this message is all about. But the Lord replied, "No, for I will give a sevenfold punishment to anyone who kills you." And then the Lord put a mark on Cain to warn anyone who might try to kill him. And so Cain left the Lord's presence and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Well, this is really a fascinating Bible story and has prompted endless speculation and debate. What is the mark of Cain? What is the mark of Cain? But I really think that's the wrong question. If it were the right question, God would answer it in his word, but he doesn't answer it. All we're told is that God put a mark on Cain. And I think God's objective, his purpose in putting this story, including the story in his book, is not what is the mark of Cain, but his point is that there is a mark on Cain. There's a divine mark on Cain. And when you think about it, Cain had just committed the very first murder in human history. And it's hard for us to imagine how shocking that must have been. But when you think about how shocking it is for us, around here in our small, close-knit community, right, when someone's life is taken from them, which thank God rarely happens, but when it does, it shocks us to our core, doesn't it? It shocks us to our core. And so just keeping that in mind, it helps us to perhaps better imagine how much more intense the shock and confusion would have been in the small, close-knit little community of Genesis chapter 4, where no human being had ever been murdered. Not there, not anywhere, not ever. This was absolutely unheard of, and they were shocked and traumatized and confused. What do we do? What do we do with this hideously grotesque, subhuman monster who has just committed the absolutely unthinkable? Right? The human race is in an uproar. What do we do with Cain, this hideous, grotesque monster, this subhuman person? And God needed to make a point then, as still needs to be made today. No matter how far they've fallen from my plan, they still bear my mark on their lives. They still bear my fingerprint. And God marked an image bearer who wasn't living into his image. You understand that? He marked an image bearer who wasn't living into his divine image to remind everybody else, yes, he's done something monstrous, but I've never created a monster. I've never created a monster. This human being still is created in my image. This man still bears my fingerprint. That's the point of the mark of Cain. And so may I suggest that we are marked, church, as Christ followers, to see those around us with the Father's eyes, to recognize and to call out of them his divine fingerprint, his mark on their lives, even if, like Sid's toys, let's say, they seem frightening, they seem disfigured, they're broken, they're ugly. We're still to see the fingerprint of God on them, even if, like Cain, they don't look like image bearers. Even if they've done the unimaginably monstrous. Even if they're not living into their divine image. Right? That's a difficult thought for many of us to wrap our hearts and minds around, isn't it? Right? We've all known people who have done some monstrous things. And it's really hard for us to wrap our hearts and minds around the fact that they still bear the image of their Maker on their lives. Isn't it? It is. I mean, I don't know about you, but I, for one, am glad that God didn't write me off when I wasn't living into my divine image, right? When I made choices that by his standards were every bit as monstrous as Cain's. I'm glad that God even still recognized in me his fingerprint and put others in my life to call his fingerprint out of me. How can I not do the same? How can I not do the same for others? Church, how can we not do the same for others? Every single person we will ever meet was created in the image of God, with a divine fingerprint on his or her life, and with a God-given need and a God-given desire to be valued, to be loved, to know that they matter, to know that they have purpose. And the gift, listen to this, the gift that you and I as Christ followers bring to the human race is to help our fellow image bearers discover the Father's mark, the Father's fingerprint on their lives. So let's take another moment for personal reflection. So as you think about the misfit toys around you, as you think about maybe even the seemingly monstrous and subhuman misfit toys around you, what would it look like if God helped you to see them as he sees them, even if they're not living into their divine image? Just prayerfully reflect on that for a moment. Okay. The next point is really just a very simple, practical application. One of the best ways that you can look for and recognize and call out the divine mark on another person's life is just to actually spend time with them and listening to their story. Just listening to them. You can look for the divine mark on their lives simply by listening. In James 1:19, the Lord tells us the importance of being eager to listen, and more eager to listen than to talk at people or to even get angry at people for why they do whatever it is they're doing. So understand the next verse. So understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. It's talking to you and me. This is Christ followers. Understand this, Christ followers. You must all be quick to listen and slow to speak, and slow to get angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And so if we want to produce good fruit, if we want to produce the righteous outcomes that God desires in the lives of those around us, we need to just be quick to listen to them, to be quick to listen to their stories, to be slow to speak, and to be slow to get angry and frustrated with why they do the things they do. And really a very simple way to listen to them, to find out their stories, is to simply ask. It's crazy. You might want to write that down. Ask questions. Ask them about their stories and give them space to talk. You know, I've been trying to be more intentional about cultivating context out there, you know, with people who, as far as I know, don't yet have the name of Jesus written on the boots of their life. That's a Toy Story reference if you don't know what in the world is he talking about. I've been just trying to build relationships out there with people, as far as I know, don't go to church anywhere. They have not given their lives to Jesus yet. And I'm finding it more and more easy to simply build those relationships, to cultivate those relationships by simply taking an authentic interest in them. Right? It's easy for us as Christ followers to feel like, oh no, I got to tell them Jesus stuff. And we get all nervous on the inside, right? It's like, we're talking about like the football game. How do I turn this into a spiritual conversation? Right? You guys know that one? Football, Jesus, football, touchdown, Jesus. Yeah, right. I'm finding it easier just to build relationships by asking them questions. Hey, tell me your story. I don't know anything about you. Asking questions about their story and just giving them space to share. And it's amazing. I've been finding, as I've just been creating space, they're wanting to ask questions of me. There's just a give and take when we create space, right? So, for instance, just a couple days ago, I was at the gym, and I got in a conversation with a guy who's actually a pretty burly, mean-looking dude. He's nasty-looking dude. The kind of guy whose appearance says, back off. You know what I'm talking about? His appearance says, back off. And about whom, at least I would be, maybe you as well, would be tempted to make up, oh, I know what he's all about. Right? We make up backstories about individuals like this. He's a cannibal. I think he literally eats people for snacks, right? But you know what? I just a couple days ago, I just engaged him in conversation, asked him a couple questions, and what do you know? I discovered he's a super friendly guy. In fact, he's quite chatty. It's like, it's like, whoa, I thought you were going to like break my legs off and beat me over the head with them. He's like, so anyway, listen to this. His appearance said stay away, but his heart said discover me. I want to be found. I want to be known. Understand this, my dear brothers and sisters. You must be quick to listen. You must be quick to listen. Next slide. I found this. It said that Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, carried around a handwritten note in his pocket that said this. I can't read it. Jason, can you read this out loud? I'm going to get messed up. Can you have the microphone? Just stand up and read this loudly.
Wait, you want me to do this?
You're running the moment. Just read it.
Frankly, there isn't anyone who could not love once you have heard their story.
Thank you. Wow, that's powerful. That is so powerful. Yeah, let's do that again. I like that.
Frankly, there isn't anyone who cannot love once you have heard their story.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Back in Sid's room in Toy Story, only after time spent, Woody and Buzz spent with these hideously disfigured others. Those others, they fixed Buzz's broken arm, remember? Some of you are going to have to go rent this. Why? I've never even seen this movie. All right, these monstrous toys fix Buzz's broken arm, and it's only then, after time and in the context of close relationship, that Woody and Buzz finally see these toys through a different set of lenses. They're not cannibals. They don't eat their own. They're not monsters. They simply want to be known. They simply want to be discovered. They simply want to belong. They simply want to be made whole. They want to be made whole. And they don't want other toys to suffer the same abuse that they've experienced. That's a new set of lenses that Woody and Buzz finally see them through with time, just finding out their story. And so let's take another moment now for personal reflection. So as you think about the misfit toys on your list, if you've got them on your My 5 prayer list, what would be one step I could take this week to listen to his or her story? One question you could ask to give them space to be discovered by you. I'd challenge you to even write down the question and to write down the when. If it's a coworker, I'm going to say, hey, let's eat lunch together. Not because you're trying to corner them to talk at them with some sort of Jesus conversation that you'll freak out about and you'll be really weird, right? And they'll say, oh, that was horrible. I never want to have lunch with that person again. They're super uptight and nervous. Just a time this week just to be with them and discover their story. So as Christ followers, then we're also marked to leave a mark. Not only look for, recognize, and to call out the mark of the Maker on those around us, but to actually leave a mark on their lives. We see this in verses like 1 Peter 2:12. People who don't believe are living all around you. And they might even say that you're doing wrong just because they don't like you because you're a Christian. I just totally jumped to a different page. So, live such good lives that they may see the good you do. Live such good lives that they will see the good you do, and they will give glory to God on the day He comes. Listen, the mark of a Christian in society is to be the mark of good living and good doing. Good living and good deed doing. You know, it used to be an insult to call Christians a bunch of goody two-shoe do-gooders. Yes, exactly. That's exactly what God tells us we're supposed to be like in this verse. Good lives and good deeds. Even to those who think we're nutcases because we're Christians. We're to be a bunch of goody two-shoe good do-gooders. And God tells us when you do good, when you leave a mark on those around you, they will experience goodness and they will give me glory for the goodness they experienced. I will be glorified in the marks of goodness that you leave around the world. You know, back in Toy Story, when Woody and Buzz get past these external appearances of the disfigured toys, and when they get past their invented self-protective backstories about them, and after they actually get to know who they are and they get to know why they are the way they are, Woody and Buzz no longer see them as others to protect themselves. They no longer see them as other to be kept at a safe distance, but instead they see that these toys need both hearts of goodness and they need hands of goodness. And Woody and Buzz literally step in to be a voice for the voiceless, right? Woody even breaks the rule of talking to a human being as a toy, right? You see it happening there. Hey, Sid, stop it. That's a paraphrase. And that's what we are marked to be, Christ followers. The voice for the voiceless, not a judgmental backstory inventing voice for the voiceless, but good doing, good being, Father glorifying voice for the voiceless, hearts of goodness and hands of goodness. You have been marked to leave a mark. And so I have the worship team come forward. We're going to land this plane here. But I want to conclude with this story about leaving a mark on those around us. I think you'll understand the significance of this story and the timeliness of this story. So listen to this. In the first 200 years of the early church, so the first and second century AD, there were two devastating pandemics that swept through the Roman Empire. Two devastating pandemics. One plague in 165 that claimed a total of 5 million lives. 165 AD. And it even took the lives of one of the Roman emperors, Marcus Aurelius. A second plague began in 250. It lasted for nearly 20 years, and at its peak, historians say, it was claiming the lives of nearly 5,000 people a day just in Rome alone. 5,000 a day. All right? History records the actions of the Roman pagans during the pandemic. It says they pushed away those with the first signs of the disease. Maybe they were coughing, maybe they had a fever. And they fled from their dearest, even their closest ones they fled from. They even threw them half dead into the roads and treated unburied corpses like refuse in hope of avoiding the plague of death, which, for all their efforts, was difficult to escape. That was the actions of those out there. But listen to what church history records of the goody two-shoes, do-gooder Christians in the Roman Empire. This is from Eusebius's Ecclesiastical History. And I think he's actually quoting one of the church fathers, Cyprian. Most of our brethren showed love and loyalty in not sparing themselves while helping one another, tending to the sick, and with no thought of danger, and gladly departing this life with them after becoming infected with their disease. Many who nursed others to health died themselves, thus transferring their death to themselves. The best of our brothers lost their lives in this way. Some presbyters, these are church leaders, deacons, and even laymen. A form of death based on strong faith and piety that seems in every way equal to martyrdom. They would also take up the bodies of the saints, close their eyes, shut their mouths, and carry them on their shoulders. And they would embrace them, wash and dress them in burial clothes, and soon receive the same services themselves. And it was not just to the church. It was in the streets of Rome and across the urban centers of the Roman Empire. The Christians were the ones who stayed in the cities to nurse the sick, to bury the dead. And the result was that once the pandemics had run their courses, the urban centers of the Roman Empire had become predominantly Christian. Because those who were touched by the sacrificial, good-doing hands and hearts of the Christians, they gave their lives to Jesus. The Roman Empire became largely Christianized after the 2nd century, not through conquest, but through service and self-sacrifice. Through service and self-sacrifice. And so the connection should be obvious as we consider this radical and self-sacrificial care of our Christian ancestors. And we consider that against what is happening across the globe today with the coronavirus. All right? I think we can't help but be challenged to think about what it might look like for us if things grow worse. What might it look like for us to be wise and yet radically caring as the followers of Christ? I'm just throwing this thought out there. What might it look like for us to be wise yet radically caring for the others out there, come what may in our lifetimes? We were made to look for and to leave a mark.